Rain hammers against marble floors. Crystal shatters. A pregnant woman kneels in her own blood, watching her wedding ring, her grandmother's ring, slide onto another woman's finger. They say diamonds are forever, but they never tell you what happens when forever breaks. Some betrayals cut so deep they reach bone. Others, they reach soul. And when a woman discovers that everything she believed about love, loyalty, and family was built on lies, something ancient awakens. Something that doesn't forgive, doesn't forget. Tonight, in the shadows of Beverly Hills, mansions and crystal chandeliers, a empire built on diamonds and deception will learn a truth as old as time itself. There are some people you should never cross. Some families whose blood runs deeper than money, deeper than fear. And when that blood finally rises, God help anyone who stands in its way. This is the story of what happens when a phoenix decides to burn everything down before it rises from the ashes. Welcome to the reckoning. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floors of the Beverly Hills mansion as Isabella Romano carefully polished her wedding ring. The 10-carat diamond caught the candlelight, sending rainbows across her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant, she moved with the deliberate grace of expectant motherhood, her hand instinctively resting on her rounded stomach as she prepared for what should have been the most romantic evening of her life. Tonight marked their 5th wedding anniversary, and Marcus had spared no expense. White roses, thousands of them, adorned every surface of their sprawling estate. The scent of jasmine drifted through the French doors from the garden, where fairy lights twinkled like fallen stars. Isabella smiled softly, remembering how Marcus had proposed in this very garden, promising her a lifetime of love and devotion. "Mrs. Blackwood," called Maria, their housekeeper, appearing in the doorway with a silver tray. "Mr. Blackwood has arrived with the guests." Isabella's heart fluttered with anticipation. She took one last look at herself in the antique mirror, her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, her emerald dress flowing gracefully over her pregnancy curves, and most importantly, her grandmother's ring sparkling on her finger. The star of Romano had been passed down through 3 generations of Romano women, a symbol of enduring love and family legacy. The ring held more than sentimental value. Isabella's grandmother, Lucia Romano, had built a jewelry empire from nothing after immigrating from Italy. She had whispered stories to young Isabella about the diamond's origins, how it had been discovered in a mine in South Africa, and personally selected by Isabella's great-grandfather as a symbol of their eternal bond. As Isabella descended the grand staircase, she could hear the murmur of conversation and gentle laughter from the garden. Marcus stood near the fountain, devastatingly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, his sandy brown hair perfectly styled. At 35, he commanded respect in any room he entered. As CEO of Blackwood Tech, he had built a fortune worth $500 million through sheer determination and brilliant business acumen. But something felt different tonight. Marcus's smile seemed forced, his eyes avoiding hers as she approached. The guests' influential friends from their social circle offered polite congratulations, but Isabella sensed an undercurrent of tension she couldn't quite identify. "Darling," Marcus said, finally meeting her gaze. His voice carried a strange coolness that made Isabella's stomach clench. "You look adequate." The word hit her like a slap. In 5 years of marriage, Marcus had never spoken to her with such casual dismissal. Isabella forced a smile, telling herself she must have misheard. "Thank you," she replied softly, reaching for his hand. "This is beautiful, Marcus. Just like our first date." Marcus pulled his hand away, adjusting his cufflinks with unnecessary attention. "Yes, well, things change, don't they?" Before Isabella could respond, a melodic laugh rang out from across the garden. She turned to see Vivian Sterling, Marcus's vice president of marketing, approaching with the confidence of a predator. At 26, Vivian possessed the kind of striking beauty that turned heads platinum blonde hair that caught moonlight like spun gold, piercing blue eyes, and a figure that her designer dress displayed to devastating effect. "Marcus, darling," Vivian purred, placing a possessive hand on his arm. The evening is absolutely perfect. Isabella noticed how Vivian's fingers lingered on Marcus's forearm, how she leaned just slightly too close when she spoke. A cold realization began to creep through Isabella's chest, but she pushed it away. Not tonight, not on their anniversary. Hello, Vivian, Isabella said, maintaining her composure despite the growing unease. Thank you for coming. Vivian's smile was sharp as a blade. Oh, I wouldn't miss this for the world. After all, Marcus and I have been working so closely together lately. The emphasis on closely was unmistakable. Isabella's hand instinctively moved to her belly, seeking comfort from the gentle movements of her unborn child. She looked at Marcus, expecting him to correct Vivian's inappropriate behavior, but he was staring into his champagne glass as if it held the secrets of the universe. Isabella, Marcus said suddenly, his voice cutting through the garden party's ambient noise. We need to talk, privately. He led her away from the guests, toward the gazebo where they had shared their first kiss. The fairy lights that had seemed magical moments before now felt garish and mocking. Marcus stopped abruptly, his back to her, his shoulders rigid with tension. I can't do this anymore, he said without preamble. Can't do what Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus turned, and for the first time in months, she saw him clearly. The man she had fallen in love with, the ambitious but kind entrepreneur who had courted her with poetry and promises, was gone. In his place stood a stranger with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. Us, the pretense. He gestured vaguely at her swollen belly. I need a partner, Isabella, a woman who can match my ambition, not someone who sits at home getting fat and expecting me to celebrate it. The words struck her with physical force. Isabella staggered backward, her hand flying to her throat. Marcus, what are you saying? I'm carrying our child. Our child? Marcus laughed bitterly. When was the last time you contributed anything to our empire? When did you last close a deal, attend a board meeting, or do anything other than play house? I've been supporting you, building our home, preparing for our family. Vivian closed the Henderson account last week. $50 million. Isabella, while you were shopping for baby clothes, she was securing our future. Isabella felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Are you having an affair? Marcus's silence was answer enough. The sound that escaped Isabella's throat was somewhere between a sob and a gasp. She turned to flee, but Marcus caught her arm with bruising force. Don't make a scene, he hissed. We have guests. How long? Isabella whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Does it matter? Vivian understands the business world. She understands what it takes to build something lasting. You. He looked at her with undisguised contempt. You're just decoration. As if summoned by her name, Vivian appeared at the gazebo entrance. She had been watching, Isabella realized with horror. This entire conversation had been orchestrated. Oh, good, Vivian said with mock concern. You've told her. This is so much better than sneaking around. Don't you think? Isabella stared at the woman who had destroyed her marriage. How could you? I trusted you. I welcomed you into our home. Vivian shrugged elegantly. Business is business, sweetheart. Marcus needed a real woman by his side, not a glorified housewife. The cruelty in Vivian's voice was breathtaking, but worse was yet to come. You know what I've always admired about you, Isabella, Vivian continued, her eyes glittering with malice. Your jewelry, especially that ring. She pointed at the Star of Romano with one perfectly manicured finger. It's far too beautiful for someone so ordinary. Isabella instinctively closed her fist around the ring. This belonged to my grandmother. It's not for sale. Oh, but I'm not buying it. Vivian smiled sweetly. Marcus is giving it to me. Aren't you, darling? Isabella whirled toward her husband, searching his face for any sign of the man she had married. Marcus, no. This ring has been in my family for generations. You can't. I can do whatever I want. Marcus said coldly. You signed a prenup. Remember, what's mine is mine. What's yours is also mine. The ring wasn't mentioned in the prenup because it's not marital property, Isabella protested. It's my inheritance. Prove it, Vivian challenged, stepping closer. Where are the papers? The will, the documentation. She circled Isabella like a shark scenting blood. Or did your precious grandmother just tell you pretty stories about your inheritance? Isabella's mind raced. The documents were somewhere in her mother's old apartment in Little Italy, but she hadn't thought to secure them when she married Marcus. She had trusted him completely, naively believing that love would protect her from legal technicalities. They're in storage. How convenient, Vivian purred. Well, until you can prove otherwise, I think this lovely ring would look much better on someone who actually appreciates fine things. Before Isabella could react, Vivian lunged forward and grabbed her left hand. The pregnant woman, off balance and shocked, couldn't resist as Vivian twisted the ring with vicious determination. Stop, Isabella cried, trying to pull away. You're hurting me. Just give me the ring, Vivian snarled, her beautiful facade cracking to reveal the calculating predator beneath. Let go of her, Isabella shouted, but Marcus made no move to help. The struggle was brief but violent. Vivian's nails raked across Isabella's fingers as she fought to remove the ring. Finally, with a sharp twist that left Isabella crying out in pain, the star of Romano came free. Isabella fell to her knees on the gazebo floor, cradling her bleeding hand against her chest. She looked up at Marcus, expecting him to be horrified by what had just transpired. Instead, he was smiling. Perfect, he said, taking the ring from Vivian and sliding it onto her finger. It looks like it was made for you. Vivian held up her hand, admiring the way the diamond caught the light. It's absolutely gorgeous, thank you, my love. Isabella watched in stunned disbelief as her husband kissed another woman while wearing her grandmother's ring. The symbol of her family's legacy, the embodiment of generations of love and sacrifice, now adorned the finger of the woman who had destroyed her life. You monster, Isabella whispered, struggling to her feet. Both of you. Marcus turned to her with casual cruelty. Save the dramatics. Isabella, this is how the real world works. The strong take from the weak. I built an empire while you played house. Vivian is helping me expand that empire while you got pregnant and soft. I'm carrying your child. Are you? Marcus's smile was ice cold. Because I seem to remember you visiting that fertility clinic alone quite a few times. Who knows who the father really is? The accusation hit Isabella like a physical blow. She had visited the clinic for routine prenatal care, but Marcus was twisting even that into something sordid. The man she had loved was systematically destroying not just their marriage, but her very sense of reality. Get out, Marcus said quietly. Pack your things and get out of my house. Our house, Isabella protested weakly. Check the deed, sweetheart, Vivian interjected, still admiring the ring. Marcus bought this place before you were married. Your name isn't on anything. Isabella looked around the garden where she had planned to raise her child, where she had dreamed of family barbecues and birthday parties. Every plant had been chosen with care, every detail planned with love. Now it felt like a museum of shattered dreams. Where am I supposed to go, she whispered. Not my problem, Marcus replied. But I'd suggest you figure it out quickly. I'm having the locks changed tomorrow. As if to emphasize his point, thunder rumbled overhead. The perfect anniversary evening was turning into a storm, clouds gathering like an omen of the devastation to come. Isabella took one last look at the ring on Vivian's finger. Her ring, her grandmother's ring, her family's legacy. You have no idea what you've just stolen, she said quietly. Vivian laughed. Oh, please, it's just a rock. Isabella, pretty, but replaceable, unlike some things. Isabella straightened her shoulders, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. You're right, Vivian. Some things are irreplaceable, And some people always get what they deserve. Marcus scoffed. Is that a threat? It's a promise, Isabella replied, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. You both just made the biggest mistake of your lives. She turned and walked away from the gazebo, away from the party, away from the life she had built with a man who had never truly loved her. Behind her, she could hear Vivian's laughter mixing with the first drops of rain. Isabella made her way to the bedroom she had shared with Marcus, mechanically packing a single suitcase with essentials. Her hands shook as she folded maternity clothes and gathered her few personal items. Everything else, the furniture, the art, the life they had built together, belonged to Marcus. As she prepared to leave, Isabella caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her makeup was ruined, her dress stained with tears, her hands still bleeding from Vivian's assault. But her eyes burned with something new. Not just pain or betrayal, but determination. She placed a protective hand over her belly, feeling her baby's gentle movements. It's just you and me now, little one, she whispered. But don't worry, Mommy is going to make sure you never want for anything. The storm was raging in earnest as Isabella loaded her car. Rain lashed against the windows of the mansion, and lightning illuminated the garden where her dreams had died. She took one last look at the home where she had been happy, where she had been naive enough to believe in forever. Then Isabella Romano Blackwood drove into the storm, leaving behind everything she had known and loved. She had no idea that she was about to discover who she really was and the power that had always been her birthright. Behind her, Marcus and Vivian celebrated their victory, never suspecting that they had just awakened a sleeping giant. The star of Romano glittered on Vivian's finger, a beautiful trap that would soon become the instrument of their downfall. The first phase of Isabella's revenge had already begun, though she didn't know it yet. Every piece was falling into place for a reckoning that would shake the foundations of Marcus's empire and teach both betrayers that some victories come at too high a price. As Isabella drove through the rain toward an uncertain future, her grandmother's ring pulsed with a secret heartbeat, a GPS signal that had been faithfully transmitting for 5 years, waiting for the day when the Romano family would reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The cramped apartment in Little Italy smelled of old wood and faded memories. Isabella sat on her mother's threadbare sofa, staring at the single suitcase that contained everything she had left in the world. The rain had followed her from Beverly Hills, drumming against the windows like accusatory fingers. Every flash of lightning illuminated the vast gulf between her former life and her current reality. 3 days had passed since the anniversary from hell. 3 days of living on crackers and water because she couldn't afford anything else. Marcus had frozen their joint accounts within hours of her departure, claiming she might steal from him. The irony would have been laughable if it weren't so devastating. Isabella's hand moved to her belly, where her baby continued to grow despite the chaos surrounding them. At 7 months pregnant, she should have been preparing a nursery, attending birthing classes, and reading parenting books. Instead, she was rationing granola bars and trying to figure out how to afford prenatal vitamins. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered to her unborn child. Mommy thought she had everything figured out. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen. Not the baby, but hunger and stress taking their toll. Isabella knew she needed to see a doctor, but without insurance or money, that seemed impossible. Marcus had made sure she was completely dependent on him, and now that dependence had become a weapon turned against her. The apartment held memories of her childhood visits to see her mother. Maria Romano had been a quiet woman who rarely spoke of her own mother, Lucia. When pressed, Maria would only say that Lucia had been complicated and that some family history was better left buried. Now, as Isabella faced an uncertain future, she wished she had pushed harder for answers. Desperate for distraction from her growing panic, Isabella began exploring the apartment more thoroughly. Her mother had been gone for 2 years, but Isabella had never had the heart to sort through her belongings. Now, with nowhere else to turn, she found herself drawn to her mother's bedroom closet. Behind winter coats and forgotten shoes, Isabella discovered something she had never seen before: an ornate wooden chest, heavy with age and purpose. The lock had long since rusted away, and the lid opened with a protesting creak that seemed to echo through decades. Inside, Isabella found her family's secrets. The first document she pulled out made her hands tremble. It was a certificate of incorporation for Romano Jewelers International, dated 1952 with her grandmother Lucia. Romano listed as founder and sole proprietor. But this wasn't the small jewelry shop Isabella remembered from childhood stories. According to the papers, Romano Jewelers was a multinational corporation with holdings across 3 continents. "That's impossible," Isabella murmured, but her hands continued to shake as she pulled out more documents. Bank statements showing accounts in Switzerland, Italy, and the Cayman Islands. Property deeds for buildings in New York, London, and Rome. Corporate filings indicating ownership stakes in luxury retailers across the globe. And at the bottom of the chest, sealed in a waterproof envelope, was a will bearing Lucia Romano's signature. Isabella's vision blurred as she read the terms of inheritance. Upon Lucia's death, the entire Romano Empire was to pass to her daughter, Maria. Upon Maria's death, everything would transfer to her granddaughter Isabella, provided she could prove her identity through DNA testing and possession of the Star of Romano ring. The words swam before Isabella's eyes. According to these documents, she wasn't just Isabella Romano Blackwood, scorned wife of a tech mogul. She was the heir to a jewelry empire worth over $2 billion. "This can't be real," she whispered, but her fingers traced the official seals and notarized signatures. The papers looked authentic, aged but well-preserved. A knock at the door startled Isabella from her stupor. She quickly gathered the documents, her heart pounding as she approached the entrance. Through the peephole, she saw a distinguished man in his 60s, wearing an expensive coat despite the rain. "Ms. Romano," the man called in accented English. "My name is Donatello Rossi. I was your grandmother's attorney. I believe it's time we spoke." Isabella hesitated. After everything that had happened with Marcus, she was wary of trusting anyone. But something in the man's voice, a gentle authority that reminded her of her grandmother's stories about the old country, convinced her to open the door. Donatello Rossi was exactly what Isabella would have expected from a high-powered international attorney. Silver hair perfectly styled, kind but shrewd eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and an air of old-world sophistication that spoke of decades navigating complex legal waters. "May I come in?" he asked, shaking raindrops from his coat. "We have much to discuss." "Cara mia." Isabella led him to the small living room, acutely aware of the apartment's modest furnishings compared to his obvious wealth. But Donatello seemed completely at ease, settling into the worn armchair as if it were a throne. "You found the documents," he said, noting the papers scattered on the coffee table. It wasn't a question. "Are they real?" Isabella asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Donatello smiled sadly. "Very real. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and absolutely devoted to her family. She built Romano Jewelers from nothing, but she was also incredibly private. She wanted to protect you from the complexities of wealth until you were ready." "Ready for what?" "To claim your birthright." Donatello leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "Your grandmother always suspected that someday you might face betrayal, perhaps from a husband who married you for the wrong reasons. She prepared for that possibility." Isabella's hand moved instinctively to where her wedding ring had been. The Star of Romano was more than just a family heirloom, Donatello confirmed. "Your grandmother had a GPS tracking device embedded in the setting when it was reset for your mother's wedding. She wanted to ensure that the ring could always be found, no matter who possessed it." The implications hit Isabella like a physical blow. "You know where it is." "I know exactly where it is, Cara. More importantly, I know that the woman who stole it has been flaunting it all over Beverly Hills, completely unaware that she's carrying evidence of her own crime." Donatello pulled out a tablet, showing Isabella a map with a pulsing red dot. "Vivian Sterling has taken your ring to be appraised at 3 different jewelry stores in the past 2 days. She's planning to sell it." Rage flooded through Isabella, not the helpless anger of the betrayed wife, but the cold fury of a woman discovering her true power. Can we stop her? Better than that, Donatello smiled. We can let her try. You see, Isabella Sterling and Company, where Ms. Sterling is planning to sell your ring, is owned by Romano Jewelers International, as is Hartwell's, where she had it appraised yesterday. In fact, your family owns controlling interests in 70% of the high-end jewelry retailers in the United States. Isabella stared at him in disbelief. That's impossible. I would have known. Your grandmother was very careful to operate through shell companies and trusts. She believed that visible wealth made one a target. But now that you're in danger, it's time for the Romano family to step out of the shadows. Donatello opened his briefcase and pulled out more documents. Your husband's company, Blackwood Tech, owes approximately $50 million to Romano Financial Services, one of your subsidiary companies. The loans were structured through intermediaries, so Mr. Blackwood has no idea who his real creditor is. Marcus is in debt to me, heavily, and according to the terms of the loans, Romano Financial Services has the right to call in the debt at any time if the borrower's circumstances change significantly. A messy divorce, for instance, might constitute such a change. Isabella's mind reeled as the pieces fell into place. Her grandmother hadn't just built a jewelry empire, she had created a vast network of financial holdings designed to protect the Romano family from any threat. And now that protection was available to Isabella at the moment she needed it most. What do I need to do? She asked. First, we need to legally establish your identity and inheritance. The DNA test is a formality. I have no doubt you're Lucia's granddaughter. But we need to follow the proper procedures. And then, Donatello's smile was sharp as a blade. Then we remind Miss Sterling and Mr. Blackwood that stealing from the Romano family has consequences. Over the next several hours, Donatello laid out a plan that was as elegant as it was devastating. Isabella would remain hidden while they gathered evidence and prepared their legal strategy. Meanwhile, Vivian's attempts to sell the ring would provide perfect documentation of the theft. When the time was right, Isabella would reclaim not just her ring, but her entire heritage. There's one more thing, Donatello said as he prepared to leave. Your grandmother left you a personal message. She recorded it shortly before her death, with instructions that it only be played when you claimed your inheritance. He handed Isabella a small digital recorder. She was very proud of you, Azkara. Even though she never lived to see the woman you became, she knew you would be strong enough to carry on the Romano legacy. After Donatello left, Isabella sat in the gathering darkness, holding the recorder. Rain continued to drum against the windows, but the sound no longer seemed threatening. It sounded like applause. She pressed play. Her grandmother's voice filled the small apartment, heavily accented but warm with love and fierce with pride. Mia Bella Isabella, if you are hearing this, then you have discovered who you truly are. I am sorry that you had to learn in a moment of pain, but sometimes we must be broken before we can become truly strong. You are Romano blood, cara mia. We do not bow to anyone. We do not accept defeat. When the world tries to take from us, we take back twice as much. Your great-grandfather built our first shop with nothing but determination and a handful of diamonds. I built an empire with those same diamonds and a mother's love for her family. Now it is your turn. Use what I have given you. But remember, power without wisdom is destruction, and wealth without love is emptiness. Be strong, be smart, and be ruthless when necessary. But never forget that family is the only treasure that truly matters. Make them pay, Isabella. Make them all pay, but do it with style. Isabella wiped tears from her cheeks as her grandmother's laughter faded to silence. For the first time in days, she smiled, not the tentative expression of a victim, but the confident smile of a predator who had just realized she was at the top of the food chain. She placed a protective hand over her belly, feeling her baby's movements with new understanding. Her child wouldn't just be the offspring of a betrayed wife. He or she would be the next generation of Romano royalty, heir to an empire built on diamonds and determination. "Did you hear that, little one?" Isabella whispered. "Great-great-grandmother says we're going to make them pay." Outside, lightning illuminated the Little Italy skyline, and for just a moment, Isabella could swear she saw her grandmother's face in the storm clouds, proud, fierce, and absolutely unforgiving. The Romano blood was awakening, and God help anyone who stood in its way. 2 weeks had passed since Isabella's world shattered and reformed. The exclusive auction house at the Plaza Hotel buzzed with the kind of energy that only accompanies the possibility of acquiring something truly rare. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over Beverly Hills elite as they gathered for what Vivian Sterling had billed as the sale of the century. Isabella stood in the back of the room, transformed. Gone was the soft, domesticated wife Marcus had dismissed. In her place stood a woman who commanded attention, without demanding its sleek black maternity dress that accentuated, rather than hid, her 7-month pregnancy. Diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement, and an aura of power that made other attendees unconsciously step aside as she passed. At her side, Donatello Rossi surveyed the crowd with the satisfaction of a chess master watching his opponent's inevitable defeat. Behind them, a team of lawyers and investigators waited in the shadows, ready to document every moment of what was about to unfold. "There she is," Isabella murmured, her voice steady as ice. Vivian Sterling stood near the auction podium like a peacock displaying its plumage. She wore a crimson gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her platinum hair swept into an elaborate updo that showcased her swan-like neck. And on her left hand, catching the light with every gesture, was the star of Romano. Isabella's chest tightened as she watched Vivian gesture grandly while speaking to potential bidders. The woman was completely at ease, basking in the attention that came from possessing something beautiful and rare. She had no idea that every person listening to her sales pitch worked for the woman she had wronged. Marcus stood nearby, looking magnificent and miserable in equal measure. Even from across the room, Isabella could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed nervously against his champagne glass. Blackwood Tech's financial troubles had intensified over the past 2 weeks, and the $50 million loan payment was due in 10 days. This auction wasn't just about flaunting his new relationship, it was about survival. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying easily through the hushed room. "Tonight's featured lot is truly extraordinary. The Star of Romano, a 10-carat flawless diamond of exceptional clarity and historical significance. The current owner, Ms. Vivian Sterling, has graciously agreed to share this treasure with a new collector." Isabella's hands clenched into fists as Vivian stepped forward with a beatific smile. "Thank you all for coming," Vivian began, her voice carrying just enough vulnerability to seem genuine. "This ring has been in my family for generations. It breaks my heart to part with it, but sometimes we must make sacrifices for the people we love." The lie was so bold, so shameless, that Isabella actually felt a moment of admiration for Vivian's audacity. She was rewriting history in real time, transforming theft into noble sacrifice. "The ring was handcrafted in Italy in the 1920s, Vivian continued, "featuring a diamond that my great-grandmother claimed came from the stars themselves. Tonight, I'm hoping it will find a home with someone who will treasure it as much as my family has." "Fascinating story," came a voice from the back of the room. Every head turned as Isabella stepped into the light, her heels clicking with authority against the marble floor. "Though I'm afraid there are a few inaccuracies in your family history." The room fell silent. Marcus went white as alabaster, his champagne glass slipping from nerveless fingers to shatter against the floor. Vivian's confident smile flickered and died as she recognized the woman she thought she had destroyed. "Isabella." Marcus's voice cracked like a teenager's. "What? How are you here?" Isabella smiled, and the expression was both beautiful and terrifying. "Hello, Marcus, Vivian." She nodded politely to each of them as if they were casual acquaintances rather than the architects of her devastation. I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I couldn't let Miss Sterling continue her creative storytelling without offering a few corrections. You have no right to be here, Vivian snarled, her composure cracking. Security. Actually, Donatello Rossi stepped forward, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses with practiced calm. Ms. Romano has every right to be here. You see, I represent Romano Jewelers International, and we have some rather serious concerns about tonight's auction. Romano Jewelers. The auctioneer looked confused. I'm not familiar with that company. I'm not surprised, Isabella said, moving closer to the podium with predatory grace. We prefer to operate quietly. But perhaps you're familiar with some of our subsidiaries, Sterling and Company, Hartwell's Fine Jewelry, Cartwright Auction House, and, she paused for effect, the Plaza Hotel's exclusive auction division. The auctioneer's face went through several shades of pale as the implication sank in. You own this auction house. Among other things, Isabella confirmed. But tonight, I'm here about a much more personal matter. You see, the ring Ms. Sterling is attempting to sell doesn't actually belong to her. That's ridiculous. Vivian's voice rose to a near shriek. Marcus gave me this ring. It's mine. Marcus couldn't give you something that wasn't his to give, Isabella replied calmly. She reached into her purse and withdrew a tablet, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. This is the GPS tracking data for the Star of Romano, recorded over the past 2 weeks. The tablet's screen displayed a detailed map showing the ring's movements from the Blackwood Mansion to various jewelry stores and finally to the Plaza Hotel. Each stop was time-stamped and documented with frightening precision. GPS tracking. Marcus found his voice, though it sounded strangled. That's impossible. My grandmother was a woman who believed in protecting her investments, Isabella explained. When she had the Star of Romano reset for my mother's wedding, she had a micro GPS device embedded in the setting. Every piece in the Romano collection has been similarly equipped for the past 30 years. Donatello stepped forward with a briefcase full of documents. We have here the original certification of the diamond's cut and clarity, documentation of its provenance dating back to 1923, and proof of its inclusion in the Romano family trust. Ms. Sterling, unless you can provide similar documentation of your ownership, I don't need documentation. Vivian's beautiful mask was fully shattered now, revealing the desperate criminal beneath. Marcus is my fiancé. What's his is mine. Except that Mr. Blackwood never legally owned the ring, Isabella said, her voice cutting through Vivian's hysteria like a blade. It was my personal property before our marriage, protected by prenuptial agreement and never transferred to joint ownership. When Ms. Sterling forcibly removed it from my finger 2 weeks ago, she committed grand theft. The crowd began to murmur, the sound growing like gathering thunder. Camera phones appeared as guests realized they were witnessing something far more dramatic than a simple auction. This is insane, Marcus said, though his voice lacked conviction. Isabella, you're embarrassing yourself. Just leave before security. Actually, Mr. Blackwood, a new voice interrupted. Detective Sarah Chen of the Beverly Hills Police Department stepped into the light, her badge visible on her belt. We're here on official business. Ms. Sterling, you're under arrest for grand theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted money laundering. Vivian's face cycled through disbelief, rage, and terror in rapid succession. You can't arrest me. I haven't done anything wrong. Ma'am, you're attempting to sell stolen property at a public auction, Detective Chen replied patiently. That's several felonies right there. As handcuffs clicked around Vivian's wrists, she turned toward Marcus with desperate eyes. Do something. You said you loved me. You said we were going to build an empire together. Marcus stared at her as if seeing her clearly for the first time. The beautiful, confident woman who had seduced him away from his pregnant wife was gone. In her place was a common criminal, sobbing and pleading as she was led away. I, I need a lawyer, he mumbled, but his words were lost in the chaos as reporters and police officers flooded the auction room. Isabella watched it all with the calm satisfaction of justice finally served. But she wasn't finished yet. "Mr. Blackwood," she called out, her voice cutting through the noise. Marcus turned toward her like a man facing his executioner. "We need to discuss your financial obligations to Romano Financial Services." "Romano Financial?" Marcus's face went from pale to green. "I don't know any Romano Financial." Donatello smiled like a shark who had just spotted blood in the water. "Perhaps you know them by their subsidiary name Meridian Capital Group. Ring any bells?" Recognition dawned in Marcus's eyes like a slow-motion explosion. Meridian Capital had provided the $50 million bridge loan that was keeping Blackwood Tech afloat, the loan that was due in 10 days. But that's impossible," Marcus stammered. "Is it?" Isabella moved closer, her heels clicking with the rhythm of a funeral march. "My grandmother built Romano Jewelers into a multi-billion-dollar empire. Marcus, did you really think we limited ourselves to pretty trinkets?" She pulled out another tablet, this one displaying Blackwood Tech's complete financial profile. "According to our records, you're currently in default on 3 subsidiary loans, totaling $78 million. The Meridian loan was just the beginning." Marcus stared at the screen in horror as the scope of his financial entanglement became clear. Romano Financial Services, Isabella's company, held the controlling interest in nearly every aspect of his business empire. "You've been planning this," he whispered. "I've been surviving this," Isabella corrected. "You threw me away like garbage. Marcus, you humiliated me, stole from me, and tried to destroy me. But most importantly, you threatened my child's future. That was unwise." The crowd around them had gone silent, everyone straining to hear the conversation between the tech mogul and the woman he had betrayed. "What do you want?" Marcus asked, and for the first time since Isabella had known him, he sounded small. "I want my ring back," Isabella said simply. "And I want you to understand what you've lost." She gestured, and Donatello approached with a set of legal documents. "As of tomorrow morning, Romano Financial Services will be exercising its right to call in all outstanding debts. Blackwood Tech has 72 hours to pay in full, or the company will revert to our ownership." "You can't do this," Marcus protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, I can. It's all perfectly legal. You can have your lawyers review the loan documents. Though I should mention that Romano Industries will be offering positions to all Blackwood Tech employees at equivalent salaries. We believe in taking care of people." Son. The final blow was delivered with surgical precision kindness to everyone except the man who had betrayed her. Marcus swayed on his feet as the reality of his situation crashed over him. Everything he had built, everything he had sacrificed his marriage for, was gone. Worse than gone, it now belonged to the woman he had discarded. "Isabella, please," he said, dropping to his knees in front of the entire auction crowd. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was stupid and cruel, and I threw away the best thing in my life. Please, I'm begging you. Stop." Isabella's voice was quiet but absolute. "Don't humiliate yourself further." She looked down at the man she had once loved with every fiber of her being, and felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just the cool indifference reserved for strangers. "5 years ago, I would have done anything for you," she said. "I would have given you my heart, my soul, my family's legacy. And you threw it all away for a pretty face and the illusion of something better." Isabella placed a protective hand over her belly, feeling her baby's gentle movements. "You'll never know your child, Marcus. Not because I'm cruel, but because I refuse to let anyone into my baby's life who doesn't understand the value of loyalty." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble with the sound of absolute finality. Behind her, Marcus remained on his knees as cameras flashed and the crowd whispered about the spectacular downfall they had just witnessed. The Star of Romano was recovered from evidence within hours, the GPS device intact and the diamond unmarked by its brief captivity. Isabella held it up to the light in Donatello's office, watching the way it caught and reflected every spectrum of the rainbow. "What now, cara mia?" Donatello asked. Isabella smiled, sliding the ring back onto her finger where it belonged. "Now we go home. I have an empire to run and a child to prepare for. And Mr. Blackwood will learn to live with the consequences of his choices," Isabella replied, "just like everyone else." As they left the office, Isabella caught sight of herself in the reflection of the building's glass doors. She looked like her grandmother, proud, powerful, and absolutely uncompromising. The scared, betrayed wife was gone forever, replaced by something far more dangerous, a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of. The Romano dynasty had returned, and it was just getting started. 6 months later, the penthouse office atop Romano Tower offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan's skyline. But Isabella Romano barely noticed the spectacular sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She was focused on the tiny baby boy sleeping peacefully in the designer bassinet beside her executive desk. His small fingers curled around a silver rattle that had once belonged to her great-grandfather. Alessandro Romano, named for the founder of their dynasty, was 3 months old and already showing signs of the Romano spirit. His dark eyes, so much like Isabella's own, seemed to take in everything with an intelligence that made the staff joke about having a CEO in training. Mrs. Romano, her assistant, Catherine, appeared in the doorway with her usual impeccable timing. "The Forbes photographer is here for your cover shoot." Isabella glanced at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. At 29, she had grown into her power with a grace that would have made her grandmother proud. The soft curves of early motherhood had settled into the confident lines of a woman who commanded billion-dollar boardrooms with the same ease she managed midnight feedings. "Send them in," Isabella said, adjusting baby Alessandro's blanket. "I want him in at least a few shots. The Romano legacy includes the next generation." The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of revelation and reconstruction. Taking control of Romano Jewelers International had been like assembling a massive puzzle that had been scattered across decades. Her grandmother's empire was vast and complex, with holdings that stretched far beyond jewelry into real estate, finance, technology, and entertainment. Isabella had thrown herself into understanding every aspect of the business with an intensity that surprised even Donatello. She'd always been intelligent, but pregnancy and betrayal had sharpened her mind into something laser-focused and unforgiving. Where she had once been content to support Marcus's ambitions, she now pursued her own with ruthless efficiency. The Forbes cover story would mark her official emergence as one of the world's youngest female billionaires. The Phoenix from the Ashes, How Isabella Romano Built a Dynasty, would tell her story, though carefully edited to protect certain family secrets. The world didn't need to know about GPS-enabled jewelry or the network of shell companies that had protected the Romano fortune for generations. As the photographer set up his equipment, Isabella's mind wandered to the enemies she had defeated and the empire she had inherited. Blackwood Tech had been absorbed into Romano Industries within 90 days of Marcus's default. The employees had been retained, the technology repurposed, and the profits redirected into Isabella's expanding empire. Marcus himself had simply disappeared from the business world. Though Isabella occasionally received reports about his new life as a mid-level sales manager at a software company in Phoenix, Vivian Sterling had served 8 months in minimum security prison before being quietly deported to Canada, where she was working as a hostess at a restaurant her family owned. The Star of Romano had left permanent marks on her finger, where it had fused with swelling during her arrest, a reminder that some things cannot be stolen without consequences. "Mrs. Romano," the photographer called out, "could you hold the baby for this shot? I want to capture the family aspect of your success story." Isabella lifted Alessandro from his bassinet, marveling at how perfectly he fit in her arms. He had been born strong and healthy, with none of the complications her stress during pregnancy might have caused. It was as if he had been waiting to enter a world where he would be safe and treasured. "Tell me about the Romano Foundation," the photographer said as he worked, his camera clicking in steady rhythm. "What drives your philanthropy?" Isabella smiled, the expression genuine and warm. "Every woman deserves the chance to discover her own strength. The foundation provides resources for women starting businesses, leaving abusive relationships, or pursuing education later in life. We've helped over 15,000 women in the past 6 months." It was true, though she didn't mention that several of those women had been married to men who had business dealings with her companies. Isabella believed in justice, but she also believed in giving people the tools to save themselves. "And your personal life?" the photographer pressed gently. "Any romance on the horizon?" "I'm quite content focusing on my son and my empire," Isabella replied diplomatically. Though the truth was more complex than that, Dr. Alessandro Martinelli had entered her life 3 months ago, when baby Alessandro had needed emergency treatment for a mild fever. The pediatric cardiologist was everything Marcus had never been: gentle, intelligent, devoted to helping others, and completely unimpressed by her wealth. Their relationship was still in its early stages, careful and sweet and built on mutual respect rather than passion and promises. "He reminds me of your grandfather," Donatello had observed after meeting Alessandro for the first time. "A man who understood that true strength comes from serving others." Isabella had laughed at the comment, but privately she agreed. There was something about Alessandro Martinelli that felt like coming home after a long journey. He treated her as Isabella the woman, not Isabella the billionaire, and he loved her son with an uncle's devoted affection. "One more shot," the photographer called out. "Could you stand by the window with the ring? I want the light to catch the diamond." Isabella moved to the window, extending her left hand so the star of Romano could capture the dying sunlight. The ring had been professionally cleaned and reset, but Isabella had kept her grandmother's GPS device embedded in the band. Some family traditions were worth maintaining. As the camera clicked, Isabella thought about the call she had received that morning. Marcus had been trying to reach her for weeks, finally getting through by claiming it was a family emergency. When she had reluctantly taken the call, his voice had been hollow with regret. "I saw the Forbes announcement," he had said without preamble. "Congratulations. You were always destined for greatness. Was there something you needed?" "Marcus," Isabella had replied coolly, I needed to apologize. Really apologize. Not just for what I did, but for who I was. You deserved so much better." Isabella had considered hanging up, but something in his voice, a broken sincerity she had never heard before, made her listen. "I know you'll never forgive me," Marcus continued. "I don't expect you to, but I want you to know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. Not just losing your money or your connections, but losing you, the woman who loved me unconditionally, who would have supported any dream I had, who was carrying my child." "Alessandro is not your child," Isabella had said quietly. "You forfeited that right when you chose Vivian over your family." I know, and I have to live with that forever. But please, Isabella, let me at least ask, is he healthy? Is he happy?" Despite everything, Isabella had found herself answering. "He's perfect, strong and beautiful and loved." "Thank you," Marcus had whispered. "That's all I needed to know." The call had ended there, and Isabella doubted she would hear from him again. There was a finality to his voice that suggested he was finally accepting the consequences of his choices. "Perfect," the photographer announced, lowering his camera. "I think we have everything we need for a stunning cover." As the photography team packed up their equipment, Isabella settled back into her chair with Alessandro, who had slept through the entire session like the professional he was destined to become. Mrs. Romano, Catherine appeared again, this time with a small gift box. "This just arrived by courier, no return address, but it passed security screening." Isabella opened the box carefully, her breath catching as she saw what was inside. It was a baby's bracelet, exquisitely crafted from white gold and set with a single small diamond. The workmanship was distinctive. Marcus had always been proud of his ability to design jewelry as a hobby. The accompanying note was brief. For Alessandro, with love and lifelong regret. May he have everything his father couldn't give him. M. Isabella stared at the bracelet for a long moment, then made a decision that surprised even her. She slipped it onto Alessandro's tiny wrist, where it caught the light like a promise. Your father may have been a fool, she whispered to her sleeping son, but he did love you, in his own broken way. It was, perhaps, the first step toward the kind of forgiveness that comes not from weakness, but from strength so complete that mercy becomes possible. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Alessandro Martinelli entered with his usual quiet smile, still wearing scrubs from his shift at the hospital. How was the photo shoot? He asked, moving to admire the sleeping baby. Successful, I think. Alessandro was the perfect model. He gets that from his mother, Alessandro Martinelli said, leaning down to press a gentle kiss to Isabella's forehead. Have I mentioned lately that I'm incredibly proud of you? Isabella smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with wealth or power or revenge. This man saw her not the Romano heiress or the business mogul or the scorned wife who had risen from ashes, but simply Isabella, the woman who read bedtime stories to her son and worried about whether she was making the right choices. There's something I want to discuss with you, she said, taking his hand. The Romano Foundation is opening a children's cardiac center. We need someone to head the program, someone brilliant, compassionate, and absolutely incorruptible. Alessandro raised an eyebrow. Are you offering me a job, Ms. Romano? I'm offering you a chance to save children's lives with unlimited resources, Isabella replied. The salary is negotiable, but the benefits package includes a very determined woman and her baby son who think you're pretty wonderful. Alessandro's smile was radiant as he knelt beside her chair. In that case, I accept. Though I should warn you, I come with some demands, such as complete autonomy over medical decisions, a state-of-the-art facility, and, he paused, reaching into his jacket pocket, the right to ask the woman I love to marry me whenever I think the time is right. Isabella's heart stopped as Alessandro withdrew a simple velvet box. Inside was a ring unlike anything she had ever seen, not a massive diamond meant to display wealth, but a delicate band set with sapphires, the exact color of her eyes. Alessandro, I know it's complicated, as he said quickly. I know you've been hurt, and I know you need to protect your son. I'm not asking for an answer tonight, or even this year. I just want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. Not for your money or your empire, but for you. For the woman who sings lullabies in Italian and cries during children's movies and builds hospitals because she can't stand the thought of anyone suffering needlessly. Isabella looked at the ring, then at the man offering it, then at her sleeping son who represented all the hope and love she had left in the world. For the first time in over a year, she felt something she had thought was lost forever, the possibility of happiness built on truth rather than illusion. Ask me again in 6 months, she said softly. When you've seen me at my worst, when I'm negotiating hostile takeovers and firing incompetent executives and being the ruthless businesswoman I need to be to protect my family. If you still want to marry that woman, I'll want to marry that woman, Alessandro said with absolute certainty. Because that woman is still you, Isabella, strong, brilliant, fierce when protecting the people she loves. Those aren't flaws, they're the reasons I fell in love with you. Isabella closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten for the first time in months. These weren't tears of pain or rage, but of something far more dangerous, hope. Keep the ring, she whispered, and ask me again when you think I'm ready to say yes. Alessandro stood and pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I will. And Isabella, your grandmother would be incredibly proud of the woman you've become. As he left to return to the hospital, Isabella sat in her office overlooking the empire she had built from the ashes of betrayal. Baby Alessandro stirred in her arms, his tiny hand reaching up to touch the star of Romano, where it caught the last rays of sunlight. "What do you think, little prince?" she whispered. "Should mommy take another chance on love?" Alessandro gurgled happily, his dark eyes bright with infant wisdom that seemed to say, "When you're strong enough to protect yourself, you're strong enough to love again." Isabella smiled, watching the city lights begin to twinkle below. Somewhere out there, Marcus was living with the consequences of his choices. Somewhere else, Vivian was learning that actions have prices. And here, in the penthouse of Romano Tower, a phoenix who had risen from ashes was discovering that the best revenge might just be living well. The star of Romano caught the light one final time as the sun set over Manhattan, its diamond fire reflecting not just the light of the past, but the promise of everything yet to come. What do you think of Isabella's incredible journey from betrayed wife to powerful CEO? Did Marcus and Vivian get what they deserved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like this video to support the channel, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our dramatic stories of love, betrayal, and ultimate justice. And make sure to share this with the strong women in your life. They deserve to know that they can rise above any betrayal and build something beautiful from the ashes. Coming up next, billionaire divorces wife with cancer for gold digger. His reaction when he learns the truth will make you cry. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes life knocks us down just to remind us how high we can rise.